Hey guys, welcome to Shanty Shop Mechanic. My name is Paddy, and in today's episode I'm taking a break from fixing a few machines to actually talk about the tools that I use and really to give you a breakdown as to what tools you should be looking for if you were to go into small engine repairs. So stick around and I'll show you what I have. Okay, disclaimer, I don't consider myself to be an expert. I have worked on lawnmowers and other small engines for a few years now, but I'm theming this video around somebody who's 16 or 17 who's interested in working on engines and is looking to get into it in the easiest way possible. Cheap, they're cheerful, you learn the basics, and yeah, and see how you progress through it. So this video will be something I would have liked to have watched when I was starting myself. I'm sure there's a few other videos, I haven't done any research on it, so if there's one, there's probably 1,000, but this is just my personal take on it. Some of the tools might be a bit obvious, and it might be a little bit slow for some people, but I'm just trying to give my best interpretation of what I would look for setting up a small repair business. The most basic tools, I'm sure you have a few rolling around your head there. Wrong. 0 points for Gryffindor. It's these. Your first aid kit, your earplugs, your glasses, and if you don't want to spend the money on these ones, the scrunchies. Not forgetting fire extinguisher. I have all used these when working on machine. I wouldn't go a day without using either the scrunchies or the glasses. When sharpening blades, grinding metal or cutting metal or anything like that, I don't go out without wearing these. These are tools to me. Do note that if you are to buy these earmuffs, they do have a best before, so probably once a year buy new ones, or every 2 years buy new ones. Personally, I prefer the scrunchies because when I put goggles on, it doesn't mess around with the earplugs. And to be honest, I think it is stupid for people not to be using PPE for your eyes and ears. I see people on YouTube as well, making the joke of, squinting when they're with the angle grinder or holding their hand across. I just absolutely cringe at that. I know they allude to it being a bad idea. If it's a bad idea, don't do it in the first place. Of course, first aid kit, multiple scars on my hands from improper use of tools. Use first aid kits. I know it's a bit boring, oh, your little princess, you want to put a little band-aid on it. I'm not interested, and I'd rather keep on working and try to. So definitely worth the investment. Hang it up where you can find it, which then moves on to the fire extinguisher. Yes, I've used this in the garage, and thankfully I've had one. Story on the fire extinguisher. I had a Honda lawnmower. It was leaking petrol out of the bowl and through the air filter. Didn't see it, didn't smell it. Don't ask me why. Went to go test the spark on it, removed the spark plug, and yeah, it went. I had the fire extinguisher on hand and put it out immediately. Let you know that this has the potential to destroy the lawnmower too, but a rather destroyed lawnmower than the destroyed garage. Moving away from the boring stuff, it's time to get into the meat and potatoes of tools that you're going to be using for small engines. On the theme of the fire extinguisher, I'm going to talk about the spark tester. It measures if there's spark or not. Give a quick little demonstration. I have the spark plug here, connected this end onto the spark plug, then this end goes into the coil. What happens there is you turn the engine over and what happens is a spark should go in through this tester and light this up. If that doesn't happen, well then you don't have spark. Could be a bad coil, could be a bad ground to the kill switch, usually a bad coil. If there's one modification I should make to this is to make this cable longer, because when you're working on lawnmowers it can be quite difficult to reach over and see if the light is going on and off again, but I guess that could be solved with having a small mirror along the wall as well and bringing it up close to that. So the next tool to invest in is your feeler gauge set. This allows you to accurately set the valve lash on engines. Quite important with smaller engines is because a lot of Briggs & Stratton and Honda engines incorporate what's known as a compression release. This is used when starting an engine. It wants to have a little compression in it so it can turn over quickly, so it's not much of a burden to the person who's pulling the recoil on, say, a Honda generator or power washer or the Briggs & Stratton starter. So in order to make sure that compression release is being used correctly, it's important to be able to set the lash on those valves. It is a good way of diagnosing if the compression release in those engines is broken, and then you can dig into the engine and not the other way around, which don't ask me how, I know. Next tool on the list is not actually on this table because it's a little bit too big, but it is your air compressor. Absolutely essential to have an air compressor, along with the appropriate fittings, namely to clean carbs. This is what your air compressor is mainly going to be used. You might want to branch out into air tools. It is always an option when you have that air compressor. A lot of people rely on carb cleaner. They're kind of hit and miss, and really nothing does clean out those micro jets that even sometimes these acetylene tips that can't go into. That's what really cleans out those jets and makes an engine run really well. I don't want to be insulting anybody's intelligence by playing the socket set that I have here. I know in order to get any job done with a machine, you need to have this. But the reason why I have it up here is you're looking at a 10-year-old set from Lidl. You don't need to buy super expensive tools to be able to work on lawnmowers or smaller engines. You will have to scale up as if you progress into larger machines. But for 90% of the work that you're doing on ride-ons, all that sort of jazz, this can get you by. Really, the best upgrade you can make for your socket set is to purchase the adapters for your impact or drill. Completely rejuvenates your toolkit. Okay, it's been a few days since I was at this. Got pulled away by a few customers coming in with a few machines to get fixed. Getting back into what basic boy tools you need. Just remember to get your acetylene cleaning tips also. I'll put in a clip of me using these, but also showing how important it is to have alternative ways of cleaning out the carb. In this example, I'm holding the main jet for a typical mid-size Briggs engine. It has a true hole in the bolt with another going up through the bolt where the fuel is atomized. Nice and simple, feed the wire through, and of course change down a wire size if the one you're using doesn't fit. These jets are more forgiving as the holes are bigger and really only clog if the engine is left for years or you've tried running it on dishwater. Next carb is your typical unit from Honda, unscrewed out with a narrow stemmed flathead screwdriver. This jet can be quite stubborn and can just sit there and not rotate on the threads. Don't go ape at it as it will fly away into oblivion when it does come out. Clean the jet like the other one, making sure that there's no debris left over. However, you're not done just there. There's another half of that jet that needs prying out, hence the pliers. I'm not pulling it out, I'm pushing it down the same way as the other jet came out. It's a little bit stubborn, as you can see. With the second half of the jet out, you can see tiny holes. These are the emulsifying holes, and they further the atomization of the fuel. Go through each hole, but remember that compressed air is better for this application. You might have noticed that in the previous clips I would have had a battery in this thing. However, I'm getting them reconditioned. These old DeWalt drills, a bit like the Xbox 360, they're pretty good, but there's been a few developments made in the meantime. I would personally try your best to get the lithium DeWalt batteries if they're within your budget, because you will have to refurbish the old batteries that are in them. It can be quite hit and miss where you can get refurbished ones, especially online. So, moving on to screwdrivers, you're going to want to get yourself a multitude of different types, lengths and sizes. If you saw the thumbnail, you would have seen me rocking a very small flathead screwdriver. It's not actually this one, and the reason why I'm not using it this time is that the plastic came off. It completely broke off, so bit of a moment of silence for that. So this one will have to take its place for the meantime. This one's about 5.5 inches long. You're probably going to want a 2-inch or 3-inch length of screwdriver, and that's because it's so much easier to use this type of screwdriver when setting the carbs on machines. There, a few days ago, I was working on a quad. I was trying to dial it in while it was running and wasn't getting enough fuel at the top end. I was able to use a very small screwdriver instead of be able to adjust the fuel air mixture screw, which was located at the bottom of the carb. If I didn't have that super small screwdriver, I wouldn't have had to be able to do that. I had to take the carb off, adjust it, then put it in, and then do that a couple more times before I had it properly dialed in. To add a little bit more value as to why I use the small hedge trimmer as an example. The shorter the screwdriver is, the less chance it has of walking its way off, because if you have a long screwdriver, it's going to take a lot more of your effort to, make sure that stays on the screw, especially when you're going full throttle and this thing is vibrating quite a lot. It will shake the screwdriver off. So if you're able to have it close to you, it's a lot easier that way. Whereas using, say, for rated purposes, this screwdriver here, so if it was by half the length, it'd be kind of shaking and be wobbling off. It's a lot easier to adjust these small carbs, and of course in tight areas as well. Saying that, with the brake, it is quite beneficial to have screwdrivers like this get into where the carb is, because there is quite a bit of real estate between you and carb adjustment screw. Next on your list are pullers. These deep sea creature looking things are used for removing the likes of flywheels off lawnmowers, and for ride-ons it can be particularly useful for removing the pulley wheels that hold the belts on, come down from the engine. Why you need to do that is if you need to replace the engine. A lot of ride-ons you cannot just lift the engine off without having to remove the pulley wheel. To do that, you have a few choices. You can either hammer it and destroy it, potentially. You can use an acetylene torch, or if you don't have any means to acetylene torch, you can buy one of these pulleys. So what you do is you pull this, there's a little bolt in the middle that goes up and down. You hook this onto the pulley wheels, and then you drive this up, and by virtue of that bolt going up, as you can see, it pushes the pulley wheel down. Let's give you a quick demonstration here with this flywheel of this little Briggs & Stratton. And what you would do is undo that, and this shall pop right out. However, 9 out of 10 times these flywheels are just welded to the shaft. These hooks here go underneath the flywheel. Can't do it with this one because I bought a cheap set and it broke. I'm just saying that these do work, just not my ones. Don't be like me and buy the cheapest ones. You can see that there's more than one size, which means that they're used for different aspects on engines. You can see better here that this pulley wheel, it's just slightly too small for it to reach around the flywheel, hence why it's important to buy multiple sizes. I think people use these for ball joints removals or other aspects too. It's not just limited to lawnmowers and small engines in general. If these were long enough, it would do that to the flywheel and pushing it up. Another alternative would be to use your favorite pry bar of justice, jam it in here and hammer that shaft until it pops up. However, that could be problematic where it can mushroom this bolt and then you can't remove the flywheel, or is you can break one of the fins, because these are just cast and they're just waiting to be broken by a hammer. Definitely do not use this. You can kind of get away with it with ride-ons because there's, you know, bigger components, but if you're going to apply this method on the smaller engines, do it on the bigger ones too. I don't want to even think about how many fins I've broken off lawnmowers or other machines too. Now, why would you find yourself having to remove the flywheel off a small engine? The reason being is for if the engine comes out of timing, if you have a lawnmower and it hits something immovable to itself, it can throw off the timing because there is a fail-safe on the shaft of the engine. It stops the flywheel and the engine blowing up. So in order to fix that, you will have to remove the flywheel and put in a new pin, tap it in, and then your timing is back. Now, and another reason you might have in older machines, like really older machines, or maybe different models to Briggs & Stratton or Honda, or maybe you're moving into motorbikes, they might have the timing or like the plugs and points or whatever electrical system they have behind the flywheel. So in order to be able to replace that or clean it, you're going to be able to have to remove this flywheel. This tool here, or ordinary hammer, is not going to be your friend when it comes to these engines here. These engines are mainly made from cast aluminium or whatever. It's very soft, it's quite brittle, especially when it comes to the fins. They love to break off. If you're going to be replacing things like compression release valves, you're going to want to be able to crack open the base of these engines. This engine here is just to illustrate my point. You will be working on the likes of Briggs & Stratton or Honda engines that have compression releases, and you will need to get into the engine. So you will pop open the bottom of the engine. You will be tempted in using this thinking that you'll be able to give it a light tap or whatever, but you will end up breaking it. So demonstrate that. You can see that I've cracked the bottom of this lawnmower engine. And don't worry, this thing was not going to work. The way I let myself know is I take the head off, and I know for a fact that that engine should not be put onto a customer's machine. You can see it has a lovely crack there from just me giving it a firm but fair whack. What you're going to want to use instead is the rubber mallet. This allows you to make a similar impact without causing that damage. Now, I know this is quite an extreme way of showing it. All the bolts are in the engine, so it wasn't going to go anywhere. I'm just saying this is what can happen. I will show this here as well for you on the fins. People like to whack on these, and they do break. You see, there's a fin gone. That can happen because somebody misses stood here. Let's do another one. Doesn't take a great deal of effort. Demonstrate with the rubber mallet. You can still give it a good whack with the rubber mallet. There is no damage on that cast. So moving away from whacking and breaking stuff, I'm going to talk to you about having a punch. This is another simple basic boy tool you can get. The reason why I suggest getting this is there's plenty of things that you're going to need to drill, and this is a great way of being able to set that drill bit in the same place. But some Briggs & Stratton engines, mainly the 5 or 6 horsepower engines, some of them can develop issues with the valves, particularly the exhaust valve seat. The exhaust valve seat comes out of the engine and gets stuck in between the exhaust valve, and you can have an engine that's running perfectly and then stops and there's no compression. There's no signs of sparklies in the oil, meaning there's no bits of metal in the oil. You have no idea what the hell's going on. So take the head off here. As you pop the head off, you will see that the seat is taken out. So what happens is there's a little seat. You might see the perimeter, the outline of the valve. You need to sit it back into it properly. And once you have the seat back in place, don't leave it like that. You'll need to hammer the area around the seat using a punch that will bend the metal around it, holding that seat into place. Definitely worth your while getting a punch. Gloss over quickly a few things you're going to want to get: a long needle nose pliers. Don't buy one, buy a whole rake of different types of them. This is quite a useful one, but I would benefit from either a shorter one or even with longer handles on it too, along with a decent adjustable spanner and a pipe wrench, and of course a lovely angle grinder. I know some people question whether or not this is the best way of sharpening. You can use the bench grinders as well. I haven't any real issues with this. It's nice and quick. You don't have to have a katana sharp, but it gets it pretty close. Another tool I would highly recommend getting is a rounded bolt or nut socket set. If you have a rounded bolt or a bolt that's pretty crusty looking and you know for a fact that the socket that you're going to put on it or spanner is just going to destroy it, or best to get one of these, hammer it on. It cuts into the head of the bolt, and then that allows you to be able to remove that bolt. I've used them in some pretty extreme situations. So yeah, I was able to get on with my job, and it doesn't damage the bolt as well. You can reuse it. So highly recommend getting one of these. And if I was to critique the one that I bought, try and get one that goes below 9mm here. So there's been a few times where there's been 8mm bolts that would have benefited from using this. This one goes from 9mm to 19, so there's definitely room for improvement with buying this too. Try to get the most expansive one that you can. When you transition to working on ride-ons, you're going to need a way of being able to get underneath them. One way is using one of these jacks. No, I haven't found this in the skip, or I didn't leave it in the sea. It's just made out of cheap steel, but it has gotten me to about 8 years of service. However, it is in dire need of replacement. This works is you drive the rear wheels up onto this part here. You start spinning this around. It lifts it right up. By virtue, it lifts the ride-on. Do this on a level ground, and then you're able to go underneath the ride-on and have other ways of making sure that that ride-on is secure too. If you've seen a previous video, I wasn't using this jack. I was actually using my hand and tilting it over, and I paid for the consequences of that. Thankfully, that wasn't a customer's machine. I think that's going to tie it in for this video. I just wanted to give a brief overview of some of the tools I use. This is more or less a basic boy starter kit for working on smaller engines. If you do have any other suggestions or tools, do leave them in the comments. More than happy for other people to be able to learn that, along with myself of course. So if you enjoyed it, give us a like, and yeah, consider subscribing. I will be progressing into other aspects of machines. Thank you very much.